I didn't know it yet, but that room was the start of my erasure. My name is Thomas Reddick. I'm 51 years old. I live in Dayton, Ohio. I'd been with Faraday and Hume for 24 years, long enough to see 5 COOs come and go, long enough to survive 2 mergers, a recession, and 3 different logos. When I started, we ran logistics off spreadsheets and fax orders. By the time I left, there were machine learning modules deciding pallet rotations. It was a Thursday afternoon when my assistant, Miguel, dropped a folded slip of paper on my desk. Miguel's a good kid, too formal, always tucking in his shirts and asking if I had time for quick syncs. But this time, he didn't wait for a response, and just slid the note across and walked off like it burned his fingers. Harper wants you. Conference room B. Now, no explanation, just an order. But I wasn't worried. I had history in that building. When things went sideways in CU8, I was the one still talking to freight vendors while execs pretended they had other meetings. I'd flown coach to 6 cities in 3 days to keep contracts alive. My name had weight, or at least I thought it did. I grabbed my notebook, the one with the fraying edge I kept in my second drawer, and made my way down the hall. Past reception, past legal, past the new intern who always looked startled whenever I walked by. Conference room B was already closed. Inside, Harper was alone, shirt sleeves rolled, tie loosened like he wanted to project, tough but approachable. He didn't look up as I entered, just gestured at the seat across from him. "We're bringing on someone new," he said. I sat, waited. "Name's Shelby. Strategic Ops. I want you to onboard her." I blinked. "Strategic Ops is senior track." He nodded like I'd asked him what day it was. "She's sharp, fresh perspective." That's when I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was a directive. I was being told, not asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it. The kind of silence where you can feel the slope beneath your feet. Harper kept going. Some nonsense about evolving org charts and hybrid initiatives. I half listened, nodding when appropriate, but my brain was already racing. We'd never had a strategic ops role before. That wasn't a real title. That was a placeholder for disruption. And disruption, in corporate speak, meant replacement. Still, I took the meeting. I shook Harper's hand when he stood. I even smiled. But something in the way he avoided eye contact, something in the way the conference room door clicked shut behind me like a vault, told me I wasn't onboarding anyone. I was being pushed to the edge of the frame. That night, my access was revoked. Badge stopped working. Outlook gave me a password reset screen. I was gone before I could even pack. They didn't even wait until Friday. I showed up the next morning thinking maybe it was a system glitch. I parked in my usual spot, 3rd row, far left, near the cracked light post, and buzzed my badge at the south entrance. Nothing. No beep. No green light. Just that dead whirring noise, like the reader was trying to recognize someone who didn't exist. I tried again. Still nothing. I waved down the security guard. Pete, a guy I'd known since we were both wearing badge clips and worrying about cafeteria coffee. He didn't even meet my eyes. "HR wants to see you," he said flatly. No badge scan, no handshake, no, "Tom, hey, what's going on?" Just a nod toward the elevator and a stare like he'd been told not to talk to me. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. HR was on 7, the kind of floor no one visits unless something's wrong. I walked past the empty desk and into the conference room where a woman I'd never met, navy blazer, tablet in hand, not a single personal item on the table, handed me a beige folder like she was offering me a lunch menu. "Mutual separation agreement," she said, smiling like she was reading off a teleprompter. Inside was the whole script. A severance package padded just enough to look generous, a confidentiality clause, a release of claims, and one line in bold. All system ownership will be transitioned to Shelby Lang, Director of Strategy. I looked up. "Shelby Lang," I said slowly. "That's the new title?" She gave a bright clinical nod. "Yes. She'll be assuming all oversight of your org's architecture, including logistics infrastructure." I let that sit for a beat. They were cutting me out. Not with a meeting, not with a thank you, not even with Harper in the room. Just a folder and a generic HR face. No context, no warning. Just done. "I'd like to see my office," I said. "You're welcome to collect your things. We've arranged for someone to assist." I walked out without taking the folder. Down the hall, past marketing, past operations, past the quiet hallway where the whiteboards used to hold vendor rollout diagrams I'd built from scratch. My nameplate was gone. The door was open. Inside were 2 cardboard boxes, stacked neatly on the floor. One was already half packed. A janitor I didn't recognize looked up, startled. He froze for a second, like he wasn't sure if I was supposed to be there, then gave me a nod of sympathy and shuffled out, leaving the boxes behind. I stood there alone, no files, no dual monitors. My chair had been replaced. Even the ficus was gone. On my desk was a single sticky note in someone else's handwriting. Conference USB left in drawer, already backed up. I opened the drawer. That's when I saw it, tucked against the back, behind the paper clips, and the old ID badge from our Cleveland site. The notebook, black moleskin. Frayed binding, no labels. Just years of hand-drawn logic trees, system dependencies, and process maps I'd never uploaded to the server. Not because I was hiding anything, because I was building it for myself. Quietly over time. Faraday's real Alps logic, the deep-level heuristics I'd refined over 2 decades, weren't in their system. They were in mine. They thought I'd leave quiet. They thought I'd take the check, sign the papers, and disappear. What they didn't know was I had already started building something they couldn't touch, and now I finally had the time to finish it. 6 months earlier, I had lunch with Joel Brenner. It was at this hole-in-the-wall Thai place near the old rail yards. Sticky tables, faded menus, but unbeatable chili noodles. Joel had texted out of the blue, still cleaning up messes for people who don't know what a vendor margin is. I should have ignored it. I didn't. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since the logistics summit in Denver, where we'd gone head-to-head on a panel and nearly came to blows over API integration timelines. But Joel had always been sharp, cynical, but sharp. He slid into the booth like he owned it. Same leather satchel, same crooked grin. "Still stuck in that meat grinder?" he asked. "Still pretending efficiency is a department instead of a blood sport?" I snorted. "You still running that startup with the name nobody can spell?" He grinned wider. "Nope. New thing. Early stage. No boardroom fluff. No VCs breathing down our necks." He pulled out a tablet and dropped it in front of me. Black screen, simple logo, Kronar. Lean Ops. AI, he said, built for mid-tier logistics. Think of it as a gut check machine. Smarter procurement, risk prediction, contract logic, but tight, no bloat. No dashboards for dashboard's sake. I scrolled through the interface. It wasn't pretty, but it was smart. The logic trees were sharper than what most Fortune 500s ran on, and more importantly, it made decisions that looked like ones I'd make, or used to. "I need someone who knows what real fire looks like," he said. "I've got code. I need experience. War stories, trade-offs, someone who knows how systems fall apart in real life, not in boardrooms." I told him I wasn't ready, that I was buried in other obligations, which was true. Back then, I still believed I had something left to prove at Faraday. But that night, I went home and started sketching ideas in the margins of my notebook, just for fun, just theory. Then I sent Joel a DM. "You want my take on contract aging logic? Check your inbox." That's how it started. Quietly. No equity, no contract. Just weekends, late nights, conference hotel lobbies during logistics expos, where I'd scribble ideas on napkins while pretending to wait for a rideshare. Joel wrote code. I translated chaos. We called our framework sweat logic. The kind you only understand if you've ever stayed up all night redoing load balancing plans because a vendor pulled out 3 hours before deadline. We didn't advertise, we didn't pitch, we just deployed. Etbertos. Our first client, a family-owned logistics chain out of Tampa, saved $340,000 in 30 days just by using Kronar to flag underused contracts. They never knew I was involved. Kronar grew faster than we expected. Word spread quietly, sideways, no press, just whispers. Vendors who were tired of getting blamed for bad decisions. Ops managers who saw the platform and said, "Wait, who built this?" Meanwhile, I kept a low profile. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something shift, because right about then I started hearing things, soft pings from former colleagues, rumors, disruptions, Faraday-S bleeding talent. New strategy's a mess. Freight portal keeps going down. And then someone forwarded me a client list Shelby had recently botched. One of the names stopped me cold. It was a company I had helped build from the ground up. Triage Freight Holdings. Back when they still called me by name. That's when it hit me. Kronar was growing, Faraday was cracking, and the two were about to collide. They just didn't know it yet. After I left, the messages started small. Quiet. Off the record. First was a text from Ramona in contracts. "You didn't hear this from me, but Shelby's flailing, hard." Then one from Bryce in warehousing. 3 vendors walked. She froze them out of the Q3 playbook. Another, she deleted the freight portal permissions. IT says it's irreversible unless someone rolls back to last quarter's config. Except, no one knows where she stored it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I logged into Kronar. We'd built a risk pulse feature, a kind of heartbeat monitor for supply chains. It flagged anomalies in procurement timing, inventory imbalance, idle spend. We never called it AI, we just called it honest. Faraday lit up like a Christmas tree. Contract churn up 12%. Lead time distortion across 3 regions. Warehouse activity dropped by nearly half in 2 facilities, both ones I'd helped scale 5 years earlier. And worst of all, flagged staff churn markers. People weren't just leaving, they were ghosting. I knew what had happened before I saw the pattern. Shelby had pushed a flashy vendor strategy without looping in fulfillment. Warehousing didn't have the labor capacity to hit the new thresholds. It buckled mid-cycle, like it always does, when you treat ops like a math problem and forget the human part. Then came the kicker. A guy named Austin, data analyst in Tier 4 systems, got canned for performance misalignment. I knew Austin dots. Bright kid. I had promoted him 2 years ago. He wasn't perfect, but he saw holes in process flow like nobody else. Turns out he'd flagged the freight logic as unstable and suggested a rollback. Shelby fired him 2 days later. Clients bailed, at least 3, and not small ones. Triage Freight Holdings was one of them. The same client I'd helped shepherd through 2 full restructures, back when their CFO still called me the closer. I didn't feel triumphant, I just felt tired, hollow. Like watching your old house burn down after the new owners rewired the place wrong and ignored the fire inspector. This was their fallout, not mine. Then came the message that changed everything, a simple ping on Kronar's form submission. Inbound contact, Northridge Cargo. We're looking for off-record consultation on system triage. We've worked with Faraday in the past, but we're open to alternatives. Is Kronar accepting quiet engagements? Northridge, an old partner. I had onboarded them to Faraday personally back in the early 2010s. I remembered walking their shipping yards with a clipboard, helping untangle one of the ugliest 4PL vendor tangles I'd ever seen. They had my respect. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "We're quiet, but we're here. Let's talk timing." No name, no signature, no trace. Just a simple yes. I hadn't even said who I was, and still, they wanted in. That's when I knew Faraday wasn't just collapsing. They were doing it loud, sloppy, and in front of clients I had built with my own hands. And Kronar, we weren't just growing, we were becoming the place they turned to when everything else stopped making sense. We didn't advertise Kronar. We didn't need to. Every client we worked with spoke louder than 100 press releases. Quiet wins, measurable savings. Fewer meetings. Word spread fast through the right kinds of circles. The ones who still wore scuffed boots to site visits and didn't give a damn about buzzwords. Joel handled the front. He liked to talk, to pitch, to charm. I stayed buried. Architecture, logic, metrics. I liked it that way. Nobody asking about titles, just problems and answers. Then, one afternoon, Joel called me. "You might want to sit down for this one," he said. I was already sitting, buried in Kronar's decision engine, refactoring the contract signal tree for a client in St. Louis. What now? He paused, smirked. I could hear it through the line. Faraday submitted a discovery form. I stopped typing. They want a consult, he added. High priority, internal referral. I leaned back in my chair. Internal? Joel chuckled. Guess who met one of our clients at the supply chain summit last week? Said she was blown away by the system, asked for a contact. I already knew before he said it. Shelby. Shelby? He let the name hang there like a punchline. She had no idea. She'd sat across from someone using Kronar, probably someone who mentioned cost reductions and vendor logic. And she'd done what people like her always did. She tried to co-opt it. Joel asked, "You want a run point?" "No," I said. "Let's keep me buried." So I joined the meeting with my camera off, name hidden. Just Ops Strategist TWR. No one in that room knew who I was. Not anymore. We logged on early, watched the lobby fill. Shelby joined 5 minutes late, just like she always used to. Marshall joined after. Their CIO, one junior analyst. A tech guy I didn't recognize. Joel opened clean. Standard intro. Light on credentials, heavy on results. Then Shelby started presenting. She called it strategic adaptive integration. Her voice crisp, confident. She clicked through a deck, polished, branded, all very clean, until I heard it. Page 6, a slide titled Ops Memory Institutional Recall Models. The phrase sweat logic over screen logic sat in the corner like decoration. My phrase. I had scribbled that into the corner of my notebook years ago, when I was still working late in dusty break rooms trying to explain to analysts why clean data wasn't enough. I'd said it to Harper once. I'd written it in a Kronar draft. I had never once seen anyone else use it, until now. Shelby was pitching our system. Back to us, using our language. My framework. She didn't even change the flow. Every slide mirrored an early Kronar proposal. The way she explained freight memory, the way she summarized risk capture logic. It was like listening to someone try to sing a song phonetically. The words were right, but the tone was all wrong. Joel stayed calm, nodded along, asked questions he already knew the answers to. I said nothing, just watched as the woman who replaced me tried to pass off the very thing I had built in exile, as her own. When the call ended, Joel unmuted for one last line. "We'll review internally and follow up with next steps," he said. "Appreciate the deck. Lot to work with?" Shelby smiled. I thought so too. She didn't know it yet, but she just pitched us the strongest evidence we'd ever need, that Faraday didn't just lose me. They were still relying on me. They just didn't know it was me. Not yet. We drafted the agreement that weekend. Joel called it standard scope. I called it loaded. Every clause we wrote had a mirror under it. Every term had teeth. We'd learned from the best and from the worst. Faraday had trained me well, even in how to ghost-proof a contract. Clause 14.3 was the anchor, buried just deep enough that no one would blink at it. Data processing oversight will route through Kronar's embedded logic for performance benchmarking. In plain English, every internal review, every quarterly audit, every vendor pulse check, all would run through our system. Translation. They handed us the map and we became the compass. But my favorite part was the originality clause, tucked in at the bottom of the documentation terms. All strategic materials submitted for integration must pass originality verification, subject to Kronar's logic matching protocol. Reuse of external or proprietary frameworks must be disclosed at submission. We didn't spell it out, but the protocol already existed. I had built it. It could trace code structures, logic formats, even phrasing. If someone copied us, especially someone who had once stolen my slide deck and changed the footer, the system would flag it, and it did. The following Tuesday, Shelby presented her Phase 1 doc to the Kronar integration team. Joel and I sat in, cameras off. Joel was lead dev. I was systems liaison, TWR. She opened her call with fake poise, all confidence and neutral lipstick, saying she was excited for alignment. Then came the slides. Slide 3 hit first, a diagram I'd sketched on a whiteboard 3 years ago. Slide 6 used my load memory format, same color scale. Slide 9. Direct quote. Failure isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in silence between systems. My words. From an internal memo I'd written for our first Kronar pitch. She'd even italicized it. Our protocol flagged all of it. Joel didn't blink. He smiled, took notes, asked her to walk us through her logic one more time. Shelby didn't flinch either. I could tell she thought she was nailing it. And I sat back and let the system record every minute of it, every word she misused, every model she repackaged. She was building a case against herself, in our house, using our language, in real time. By the end of the call, we had everything we needed. Joel thanked her politely, said we'd start staging the pilot within a week. She thanked him, said she was glad to finally be working with smart people. Marshall, their CEO, joined the tail end of the call, face hollow. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, still smug, still polished, but brittle around the edges. He asked if Kronar had any early thoughts. Joel kept it diplomatic. Preliminary indicators look promising, he said. We're confident the integration will give you new visibility into your blind spots. Marshall nodded. That's exactly what we need right now. Then came the final line. The hook I'd waited months for. We'd like to meet in person, Marshall said. Finalize the next steps. Leighton Grand, Thursday. High priority. Joel smiled. Of course, we'll be there. I muted my mic. I already knew I'd show up late, on purpose. Because when that door opened, I wanted them to feel it before I said a word. Power had already changed hands. Now they were just signing the receipt. The conference room at Leighton Grand looked like a movie set. All glass and chrome, the kind of place built to intimidate. The table was long enough to land a plane on. The windows framed the skyline like it belonged to them. Joel was already seated when I walked in. Right side, second from the end, posture relaxed. 2 Kronar portfolios laid out in front of him, like this was just another Tuesday. Across from him sat Marshall, expression tightly composed but worn thin. Shelby was 2 chairs down, staring into her coffee like it might tell her what to say next. A board member I didn't recognize sat beside them, flipping absently through a printout. I walked in slowly, deliberately late. Not a word was spoken as I pulled out the chair beside Joel, set my folder down, and sat. No greetings, no introductions, just presence. Marshall looked up, confused at first, then cautious, then alarmed. Shelby went pale. The tech guy sitting near the end leaned in and whispered something to the junior analyst beside him. The analyst's eyes widened, then the whisper passed again. This time, up the chain. That's the guy. Joel didn't break stride. He opened the meeting like he always did. Calm, unbothered, running the room like it already belonged to us. We've reviewed the deliverables. The integration is solid. Metrics align. Process handoff can begin by end of quarter. He nodded toward me. I flipped open my folder, but said nothing. Marshall tried to find his voice. So, we're aligned? Joel gave a short nod. We are. Silence, then from the board member. Just to clarify, why exactly did Mr. Reddick leave our company? No one answered. So I did. I was let go, I said even. Refused to train someone unqualified to lead what I built. That was it. No emotion, no gloating. Just fact. Silence again. The kind that makes the walls feel like they're listening. Shelby opened her mouth, but Joel cut her off without turning. The agreement is already signed. Clause 14.3 grants Kronar oversight. Clause 16 formalizes ops review control. He turned to Marshall. We'll be taking lead on system logic moving forward. The board member nodded slowly, flipping to the final page of the packet. I see. Shelby looked stricken. The kind of look people have when they finally realize they aren't just in trouble. They're already past the point of rescue. She leaned forward, voice tight. I believe we still need to finalize the... Joel raised a finger. No, we're finalized. The folder in front of me bore my name, not a title, not a company, just my name. Thomas W. Reddick, and it sat beside their new strategy plan like a signed obituary, because in that room there was no room left for her. Kronar hadn't just been hired, we'd been embedded, and now the system that once erased me would be rebuilt around the man it tried to forget. When I stood to leave, Marshall leaned over, voice low like he thought it would soften the weight of the question. "You're with Kronar?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I am." That was all I said. No monologue, no speech. Just the facts. Plain, unvarnished, and final. I closed my folder and slid it back into my bag. Across the table, Shelby sat frozen. Whatever color was left in her face was gone. I could hear the paper in her hands tremble slightly as she fumbled for the transition documents like they might save her. My contract, the one they all had copies of, stamped and dry signed, sat open on the table, my name printed at the bottom. No title, no qualifiers. Just Thomas Reddick. Clause 16 was printed just above the signature line. All operational review portals and analytics dashboards shall transfer to Kronar oversight upon pilot confirmation. Not a request, not a suggestion. Authority. Joel didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Shelby's voice cracked as she tried to regain control. "We'll need to coordinate transition planning, timelines, access rights," Joel cut in calmly. "TWR will be looped in." She flinched like he'd slapped her. It landed then. You could see it on her face. The dawning recognition that every slide she'd ever recycled, every call she'd fumbled, every shortcut she'd taken, had brought her here. Not to the top of the org chart, but to the foot of the table, across from the man she tried to replace. Marshall rubbed his temple and looked toward the window, the way people do when they're trying not to show how badly they've lost. The board member beside him whispered something into a folded notepad and didn't lift his eyes again. They didn't just lose me, they invited me back in and handed me the keys. For a year, they'd scrubbed my name from system documents, from old decks, from training files. They rebranded my logic, buried my work under buzzwords and borrowed slides. But now I wasn't their former employee. I was the architect of the system they couldn't run without. I was the clause they didn't read, the strategist they tried to erase, and instead embedded into the very thing they needed to survive. And they did it all themselves. As I turned to leave, I caught Joel smirking out the corner of my eye. He didn't gloat, just nodded once, slow and sure, a quiet confirmation of everything we'd worked for. One of the board members leaned toward Marshall and murmured something I wasn't meant to hear. Looks like we misjudged him. I didn't stop walking. They could keep the table. I already owned the room. I walked out past the marble columns, past the valet, into the quiet 445. The sun was just starting to dip behind the glass towers downtown, throwing long shadows across the courtyard. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small in them. I didn't hear anyone call after me. No one rushed out with a last-minute apology or a panicked ask for clarification. They had said everything they were ever going to say, and I'd said just enough to make sure they remembered it. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I didn't check it. Instead, I kept walking. Half a block later, I paused to look back, not because I wanted to, but because it was habit. Reflex. A final scan, like you do before leaving an old house. But there was nothing to scan, not anymore. That place, the conference room, the corner office, the glass elevators I used to ride to late-night vendor calls, none of it held anything for me. They buried me and called it a pivot, then choked on the silence I left behind. I'd spent 24 years giving them my mind, my time, my loyalty. They erased my name from the system, replaced me with buzzwords and heels, and assumed I'd stay erased. But erasure only works when the ghost doesn't write back. And I did, line by line, logic tree by logic tree, under the banner of something they couldn't predict, couldn't own, and couldn't control. Kronar didn't save me. I built it so I didn't need saving. I made my way to the parking garage where my truck, the same one Shelby once mocked as Fleet Guy Energy, waited, dusty but steady. I climbed in, turned the key, and let the engine settle under my hand. That was it. No press release, no handshake, no viral comeback story. Just a man who rebuilt what they broke and didn't owe anyone the ending. As I merged into traffic, my phone buzzed again. I finally glanced at it, a text from Joel. They just sent over access credentials. You're live in the system, TWR. I smiled. No revenge, no grand speech. No need to look back. I wasn't their ghost anymore. I was the architect behind the walls, and they gave me the keys.